and who have a vested interest in it, and it's international. It's not just America. Americans are very, centric, and they think in terms that America is the world, but that's no longer the case. We have economic centers in many places, not just Europe. I'm also talking about China and Singapore and elsewhere. And these other centers could pile into the demand for gold, and, well, it's going to be very interesting times.
A final question, and there are actually two questions in one, is you've been early on a lot of trends, and one of them that you talked about earlier in this decade has been uranium, and now we're hearing the Obama administration saying, duh, we need to have nuclear power while the rest of the world's building lots of power plants. What are your views about uranium and rare earth, which is probably not on the radar of most investors? That's one question. And then the second one, a lot of people, because of what has happened to the market, they're going into U.S. government bonds and bond funds. They're going into cash in money market funds when the SEC just gave money market funds the right to suspend redemption. And they're being sold fixed annuities as somehow some kind of safe investment trade. What are your feelings about uranium and rare earth and also the safety trade that people seem to be in love with right now?
Sure. When I realized that uranium was the wave of the future in the 1990s, I began a long study of them, and I felt that the timing was wrong. When the long downtrend in the price of uranium was broken, I finally knew that my time had come, and I became the original uranium bug. You said that my predictions are radical. That's true. Radical meaning away from this eccentric, actually. Well, they're not radical, they're eccentric. And that comes from, of course, the Greek eggs meaning outside of, and Latin centrus meaning central. So I'm out of the center. That is true. And I don't try to be radical. What I do is I tell the truth. And the future always looks impossible. It's one of the 65 dynamisms. The truth is always unbelievable. And perhaps that's merciful. But when I turned bullish on uranium, I had just made a killing. We had made a lot of money on the internet, and I said, switch your money into tangible goods. So we got out of the high techs. And I said, uranium is the single most hated investment idea on the planet. And I rolled my eyes and I said, how am I going to sell this to people? And, Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Jane Fonda and all the whole business. But the fact remains is that oil is finite. And there is honest disagreement about how long it'll last, but the truth is it will last. More and more people are going to be using cars. It's not just America anymore. It's the rest of the world. And there just isn't going to be as much oil as people think. So the question is, what's next? Well, windmills are nice, but even with the best of good wishes, all the other things, including water energy and all the rest of them, at best, could produce 10% of our energy needs by 2050. The only real choice we have is uranium. And either you go nuclear power or you shiver in the dark, and those are your choices. It's not a question, oh, well, we're America. We don't have to do that if we don't want to. We have money. No, we don't. This country is bankrupt a number of times over. And we need to get serious about the realities of the world we live in. This is a new century and a new age. And what we have is uranium in the ground. Well, of course, I recommended it at $8 a pound. It had a phenomenal rise to $123. And I decided to hold it because I was holding it for the longer term. And it's fallen back, which I'm sorry I didn't sell it and buy it back now. But, I'm not perfect. It proves that I'm not always right. And I'm not afraid to admit that, by the way. So we have a price of uranium now in the $40 range, and I think that it's a buy now, and I'm holding it for the long term. I think we're going to have to go to nuclear power. President Obama is finally waking up, and I think it's because of his energy secretary, Mr. Chu, and he's really smart. He really understands that we need nuclear power, but it's going to be a tough sell to the American public. But that's too bad, because we're going to have to do it whether we like it or not. And I think nuclear power is a great place to invest in. It's one of my premier areas. Rare earths are also crucial. In that case, when I recommended it, as I said before, people didn't know what they were. But you can't build many of the high-tech things in the world. Your cell phone. If you're using a cell phone, no, that's where you get your rare earths. That's what you can't use that iPhone without rare earths. You can't use your BlackBerry. You can't have a cruise missile without them. Our own military is a function of rare earths. And guess who owns the rare earth production of the world? China. 96.8% of the world's rare earths comes out of China. Figure 97%. How did that happen? We were asleep. America said, we can't mine these rare earths. We don't need them. Who cares about them? So China took all the employees. So we closed down. The employees all went to China. So China now has the production. And good luck, Charlie, figuring out how to get around that problem. But I've recommended rare earths stocks, and one of them has had an advance of 8,000% here in the last year. And if you think you can do better than that with bonds, I wish you luck. But that is the way to invest. You need to be ahead of you need to drink upstream from the herd. And your last question about bonds. Well, I've already predicted much higher interest rates. But for the moment, they're going to stay down because on the near-term basis, because of a deflation. Now, at some point, if we get a currency crisis or a hyperinflation, either one, you're going to see a spike in interest rates. The United States government is going to have to raise interest rates to hold on to the people who own their bonds. In other words, you're basically paying people to buy a bond that is being debased, whose money behind it is being debased. So interest rates are going up, and when interest rates go up, bonds crash. So the people you had the average investor, they bought high-tech stocks in 1999 at the top. They got hurt in that. They bought real estate in 2001 and 2 and stocks, and they got hurt in the crash. And now they're shifting what little money they might have left into safety, the safety of the dollar, of bonds, and also annuities. You know what? They're going to get stung again. And if you don't pay attention to money, you will not keep it. The people who deserve the money are the ones who wind up with it.
Well, Mr. Dines, you've been very gracious donating your time today in this interview, and I want to thank you for coming on the program. The name of the book is called Gold Bug, and if you really want to gain an understanding of gold, what led up to the various events that you've seen in your lifetime, and more importantly, where we're going in the future, I highly recommend that you pick up a copy. It's well written, easy to understand. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to get the big picture. Mr. Dines, if they'd like to find out about this book, why don't you tell our listeners how they could do so, please, and your newsletter?
Well, it's not in the bookstores. It's at dinesletter.com and my website, DINES letter, and you can pick it up there. And after you read it, I'd appreciate you're putting it in the hands of somebody who might change the world for the better, maybe a legislator or an editor or a reporter or somebody who could do something to get some of these ideas out to at least be considered and debated publicly. And one of the things I'd like to mention also, the book is divided into 3 parts, as was Gall, I suppose. The middle part is a bunch of charts, long-term charts from my personal library, and they're long-term charts that are the judgment of the marketplace. For example, the uptrend in gold that corroborate what I've been saying, which is important to me. I need to have corroboration from the marketplace. And third is are excerpts. The third part is excerpts from the Dines letter over the years, showing how I myself began to learn. And excerpts from the Dines letter, past Dines letters that are out of print by now, and they would be very good for a student or as a textbook to go back and read how I gradually began to comprehend. The first part of the book just lays out what I've learned. And the middle chart are the charts that corroborate it. The third part is how I got there. And I think that should be a very important part of knowledge.
All right. Well, you can find out more about Gold Bug and the Dines letter at dinesletter.com. Mr. Dines, thanks for joining us on the program as my special guest this week.
Well, it's always a pleasure working with you. You're a great reporter, and I just wish that you and your listeners enjoy every day of your life.
All right. Well, thanks so much, and all the best to you, sir.
We're gonna hear it sooner or later.